Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you became terrified they would leave the moment they discovered who you really were? One cold night in Houston, Elijah brought the woman he loved to an old trailer home, hidden beside a forgotten road. The walls were cracked, the roof leaked when it rained, and most people would have walked away the second they saw it. But Claire stayed because while everyone else saw a poor black man with nothing, she thought of something nobody else ever noticed. And before that night was over, the truth about Elijah would shock the entire company they worked for. Houston looked different. At night, the streets became quieter. The city lights reflected against wet roads, and somehow people became more honest after dark. Claire Whitmore noticed that about Elijah Carter long before she realized he was hiding something. They had worked together for almost 6 months at Morrison Logistics. Claire worked in employee wellness support while finishing her nursing certification. Elijah worked maintenance, at least that was what everybody believed. Every morning he arrived before sunrise, gray work shirt, old pickup truck, steel-toe boots. He fixed broken lights, moved heavy equipment, helped warehouse workers nobody else wanted to help. And no matter how people treated him, Elijah never lost his calm. That was what made Claire curious. One afternoon, she watched him quietly clean coffee stains outside the operations office, while several employees walked past him without even saying thank you. Then Brandon Hale stepped outside, tall, expensive suit, cold smile. Carter Brandon said the conference room floor still looks dirty. Elijah looked up calmly. I cleaned it already, then clean it again. A few employees exchanged awkward looks. Nobody challenged Brandon. Elijah simply nodded. All right. Claire felt anger rise inside her chest, not because Elijah cleaned floors, but because Brandon spoke to him like he was beneath everybody else. Later that evening, Claire found Elijah outside changing a broken light near the loading dock. You know he targets you, right? She asked. Elijah climbed down slowly from the ladder, maybe. He replied quietly. You always do that, do what pretend things don't hurt you. For a moment, Elijah looked caught off guard. Then he smiled softly. Some people get used to being underestimated. Claire studied his face carefully. There was sadness there. Quiet sadness, the kind people carry for years. Over the next few weeks, they started spending more time together. Coffee after work, lunch breaks, outside the warehouse, conversations during Houston rainstorms. But Claire slowly noticed something strange. Every time she asked Elijah where he lived, he changed the subject every single time. Where exactly do you stay? She asked one afternoon. Elijah pointed at her fries. You gonna finish those? Claire laughed. There you go again. What, you dodge questions professionally? He smiled but said nothing. Another night, Claire offered to drive him home after heavy rain. Flooded several streets, Elijah refused immediately too quickly. I'm fine, he said. The sharpness in his voice surprised both of them. A second later, he sighed, sorry. I just prefer handling things myself. Claire looked at him carefully. That answer sounded deeper than the moment itself, like he was protecting something or hiding from it. One Friday evening, most employees had already gone home. Thunder echoed outside. Claire walked past the loading dock and saw Elijah sitting alone near the warehouse entrance. Rain poured heavily beyond the metal roof. He stared silently into the darkness, lost somewhere far away. Claire sat beside him quietly for almost a minute. Neither of them spoke. Then Elijah finally said, Do you think people treat you differently once they know where you come from? Claire turned toward him. That depends on what whether they respect people to begin with. Elijah looked down at his hands. The silence between them suddenly felt heavier. Claire studied him carefully. Then she finally asked the question that had been sitting in her heart for weeks. What are you hiding, Elijah? 3 days passed before Elijah finally answered Claire's question. For 3 days, he stayed unusually quiet at work. He still fixed broken lights, still helped warehouse workers, still ignored Brandon Hale whenever the man spoke to him like he was invisible. But Claire noticed the difference. Elijah looked distracted, like someone fighting a battle inside his own head. Then, on Thursday evening, after most employees had already gone home, Claire walked into the parking lot and saw him waiting beside his old pickup truck. The Houston sky was dark and heavy with rain clouds. Elijah looked nervous. "Do you have time tonight?" he asked quietly. "Claire studied his face for you, yeah?" He hesitated before speaking again. "I want to show you something." Claire already knew what he meant. "Your home," Elijah nodded slowly. The drive across Houston felt strangely silent. At first, they passed bright restaurants and busy streets. Then, the city slowly changed. The buildings became older, the sidewalks cracked, streetlights flickered above empty stores and run-down gas stations. Claire looked outside quietly, while Elijah kept both hands tight on the steering wheel. After nearly 40 minutes, he turned onto a narrow road. Near the edge of the city, old trailers stood behind rusted fences. Some roofs were covered with tarps. Children's bicycles lay in patches of dirt. A dog barked loudly somewhere nearby. The neighborhood looked poor, very poor, but it also felt alive. An old woman watered flowers outside her trailer. Two little boys chased each other beside a broken basketball hoop. Music played softly from somewhere down the road. Finally, Elijah parked in front of an old white trailer with faded blue trim. The porch leaned slightly. The roof looked patched in several places. A weak yellow light glowed behind thin curtains. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Elijah finally whispered, "This is it." Claire turned toward him. His expression had completely changed at work. Elijah always looked calm, strong, controlled. But here he looked vulnerable, almost ashamed. "My mother raised me here," he said softly. Claire listened quietly. "She worked 2 jobs most of my childhood, sometimes 3. A faint smile crossed his face. She used to joke that this trailer leaked every time God sneezed. Claire looked at the patched roof again. Suddenly, the trailer no longer looked ugly. It looked tired, like it had survived difficult years beside the people inside it. Elijah stepped out of the truck. Claire followed slowly behind him. The gravel crunched beneath their shoes. An elderly black woman sitting on a nearby porch looked up immediately the moment she saw Elijah. Her face brightened. "Well," she called warmly, "look who finally came home." Elijah smiled for the first time that evening. Miss Evelyn. Miss Evelyn's eyes moved toward Claire. A knowing smile crossed her face. "So this is the young lady." Elijah rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Miss Evelyn." "What?" She laughed softly. "I'm old, not blind." Claire smiled politely. "It's nice meeting you." Miss Evelyn nodded gently. "You be kind to him," she said. "That man carries more pain than he shows people." Claire glanced towards Elijah. He immediately looked away. That small moment told her more than words could. Elijah unlocked the trailer door slowly. Then he stepped aside. The inside was tiny. An old couch sat near the window. A standing fan hummed softly in the corner. The kitchen table looked scratched from years of use, but everything was clean, carefully clean, like somebody had spent years protecting what little they had. Claire stepped farther inside. Family photographs covered one wall. A younger Elijah beside a smiling black woman in church clothes. School pictures, birthday photos, old memories frozen in time. Behind her, Elijah stayed near the door, almost like he expected her to leave. "I know it's not much," he said quietly. Claire turned around immediately. His eyes were lowered now, ashamed, and somehow that hurt her more than the trailer itself. No decent person should feel ashamed of surviving. Claire slowly touched the edge of the old kitchen table. Then she looked back at Elijah. "You thought I'd judge you for this." Elijah gave a weak smile. "Most people do." Outside, thunder rolled softly above Houston. Inside the trailer, silence filled the room. But Claire still did not leave. She simply stood there, looking around quietly for a very long time. Claire stayed. She did not make excuses. She did not check her phone, and she did not look at Elijah with pity. Instead, she slowly walked around the trailer. Family photographs covered one wall. In one picture, a young Elijah stood beside a black woman in a blue church dress. The woman looked tired, but her smile looked warm. "Your mother?" Claire asked softly. Elijah nodded. Denise Carter. Claire studied the picture carefully. "She looks kind. She was." Elijah replied quietly, too kind for the life she had. Claire moved farther into the room. An old fan hummed softly near the couch. The kitchen cabinets looked worn from years of use. A small stack of old papers sat neatly on the counter. Claire glanced at them. Medical bills, electric notices, past due stamps. Elijah noticed where she was looking. My mother kept everything he said. Bills, receipts, letters, even when they hurt to see. Why, he gave a faint smile. She said surviving hard years mattered. Claire looked at him again. For the first time, Elijah no longer seemed like a man. Hiding a secret, he looked like someone carrying old wounds. "When I was a kid, I hated this place," he admitted quietly. "I hated the leaks when it rained, hated wearing cheap clothes to school, hated watching other kids get picked up in nice cars while I walked home here." Claire listened silently. "My mother worked 2 jobs. Most of my childhood," Elijah continued, "sometimes 3. She cleaned offices downtown at night, took care of elderly people on weekends." His eyes lowered slightly. "She used to come home exhausted, but she still smiled at me like everything was okay." Claire's chest tightened. Elijah walked toward the old kitchen table and rested one hand against it. "I thought money would erase all of this." "One day," he said softly. "Did it?" Claire asked. He looked around the trailer. The answer stayed in the room between them. This was not fake poverty, not a game, not a rich man pretending the past still lived inside him. Claire slowly sat down at the old kitchen table. Elijah looked surprised. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Why not?" "It's old." Claire touched the scratched surface gently. "This table fed." "You didn't it?" Elijah blinked once. "Yes, then there's nothing wrong with it." For a moment he could not answer. Rain began hitting the roof softly above them. Claire looked toward the photographs again, then back at Elijah. "You know what I see in this place?" she asked quietly. Elijah gave a tired smile. What a mother who did everything she could for her son. His expression changed slightly. Claire stood and stepped closer. "And I see a man who survived more than most people ever will." Elijah looked away. Shame still lived inside him. Claire could see it clearly now. "You don't need to be ashamed of this place," she said softly. Elijah remained silent. Claire's voice became gentler. "You don't need to be ashamed of the place that raised you." For the first time that night, Elijah looked at her like he truly wanted to believe her words. The next morning, Elijah came to work earlier than usual. He swept the loading area before sunrise, checked the broken lights in the hallway, then helped 2 warehouse workers move a damaged pallet near the back entrance. He worked quietly the way he always did, but Claire noticed something different. After seeing the trailer, she no longer saw only a quiet maintenance worker. She saw a boy who had grown up under a leaking roof, a son who had watched his mother work until her body gave out a man still carrying shame that never belonged to him. And that made what happened next hurt even more. Around noon, Brandon Hale walked into the main office with 3 visitors behind him. They were potential clients. Everyone suddenly straightened up. Brandon liked moments like that. Moments where people watched him lead. Moments where he could remind others who had power. Elijah was replacing a loose ceiling panel near the hallway. Brandon stopped in front of him. "Carter," he said sharply. Elijah climbed down from the small ladder. "Yes, sir." Brandon glanced at the visitors, then back at Elijah. "This hallway looks terrible." Elijah looked around. "I just finished cleaning it this morning." Brandon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then maybe your standards are different from ours." The words were quiet, but everyone nearby heard them. Claire looked up from her desk. Elijah did not react. He only nodded. "I'll take care of it." Brandon pointed toward a stack of boxes near the conference room, and after that, moved those boxes to storage. One of the warehouse supervisors stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, those boxes are scheduled for pickup. They don't need to be moved." Brandon did not even look at him. "I wasn't asking you." The room became still. Elijah walked towards the boxes. They were heavy, too heavy for one person. Claire saw him bend down and lift the first one. His jaw tightened slightly. Still, he said nothing. Brandon watched him with a small smile. "You're strong, Carter," he said. "People from rough places usually are." Claire froze. The sentence was smooth enough to sound harmless, but it was not harmless. It carried something ugly underneath. Elijah paused for half a second. Then he kept walking. Brandon turned to the clients and laughed softly. He grew up in one of those trailer communities outside the city. You know how it is. It's hard, life hard. People. Claire stood up. "Elijah," she said, "you don't have to carry those alone." Brandon looked at her. "Claire, this doesn't concern you. It does when someone is being disrespected." A few employees glanced at each other. Nobody spoke. Brandon's smile faded. "I'm asking an employee to do his job, oh," Claire said. "You're humiliating him." The room went silent. Elijah slowly lowered the box to the floor. "Claire," he said quietly. But she did not stop. Brandon stepped closer. "Careful," he said. "You're making this emotional." Claire looked him straight in the eye. "And you're making it personal." Brandon gave a dry laugh. "Personal. Please, I just know the type. Some people come from places where nobody teaches them professionalism. Trailer parks, broken homes, government checks, excuses." That was when Elijah finally turned. His face was calm, but his eyes were different. The whole room felt it, even Brandon. "Say that again," Elijah said quietly. Brandon blinked. What Elijah took one slow step forward. "Say it again. But this time, say it without hiding behind your suit." The air changed. Claire looked at Elijah for the first time since she had known him. He looked close to revealing something. Something bigger than anger. Something dangerous. Brandon scoffed. "You need to remember your place." Elijah looked at him for a long moment. "My place." His voice stayed low, but every word landed hard. "You have no idea what place I hold in this building." Brandon frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Elijah's hand tightened at his side. For 1 second, Claire thought he was going to say it, the truth, the secret, everything. But then Elijah looked toward the employees. Watching from their desks, he saw fear in some faces, curiosity in others, and Claire standing there, breathing hard, still defending him without knowing everything. He stopped. He swallowed the truth. Then he stepped back. "It means?" Elijah said slowly. "No job title gives you the right to treat people like dirt." Brandon's face turned red. But before he could answer, one of the visitors cleared his throat. "We should probably reschedule this meeting." Brandon looked embarrassed now. Claire walked to Elijah's side. Her voice shook, but she did not back down. "People from trailer parks are not less than you, Brandon. Poor people are not less than you, and Elijah is not less than you." Elijah looked at her. Something in his face softened. But behind that softness, another fear appeared. Because Claire had defended the man she thought he was, and the man he truly was, still remained hidden. That truth sat between them like a storm waiting to break. After the argument with Brandon, the atmosphere inside Morrison Logistics changed. People became quieter around Elijah. Some employees looked at him with sympathy. Others looked at him with curiosity. But Brandon looked at him with anger. Claire noticed it immediately. Every task Brandon gave Elijah suddenly became harder, more physical, more unnecessary. One morning, Brandon ordered Elijah to reorganize an entire storage room alone. Another day, he made him clean executive offices during lunch hour, while everyone watched. It was no longer subtle. It was humiliation. Claire hated every second of it. "You should report him," she whispered one afternoon, while Elijah repaired a broken printer near the employee lounge. Elijah smiled faintly. "And say with that he treats you like you're beneath him." Elijah kept working quietly. "People like Brandon don't see workers," he said softly. "They see status." Claire crossed her arms. "And you just accept that?" For a moment, Elijah stopped moving. Then he looked at her carefully. "You know what happens when poor people fight powerful people?" he asked quietly. Claire frowned. "What they usually lose." The answer stayed with her long after he walked away. But what Claire did not know was that Elijah Carter was not poor, not even close. Late that evening, after most employees had gone home, Elijah walked alone into a private parking garage downtown. The garage belonged to Carter Holdings, a company nobody at Morrison Logistics knew was connected to him. A black SUV waited near the elevator. The driver stepped out immediately. "Good evening." "Mr. Carter." Elijah nodded once. Inside the elevator, his expression changed completely. The quiet maintenance worker disappeared. He looked sharp, focused, powerful, a different man. The elevator opened directly into a private office overlooking downtown Houston. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights below. A silver-haired man in a suit stood near the conference table. "Board members are asking questions again," the man said carefully. Elijah loosened his tie about why the owner of Morrison Logistics still works maintenance inside his own company. Elijah gave a tired smile. "They'll survive the mystery." The older man sighed. "Most billionaires buy sports cars during midlife crises. You bought your own company and became a janitor that almost made Elijah laugh almost. 3 years earlier, Morrison Logistics had nearly collapsed. Executives planned massive layoffs. Thousands of workers would have lost their jobs. Many of them had families, mortgages, children. Elijah quietly bought controlling shares through Carter Holdings. Before the layoffs happened, he saved the company, saved thousands of jobs, and told almost nobody. Not because he wanted attention, because he wanted distance from it. Power had taught him something ugly. The moment people discovered money, they stopped seeing the human being underneath it. Women changed too. Elijah had learned that lesson years ago. Some became sweeter after learning who he was too. Sweet others saw him like an opportunity instead of a person. That was why he kept hiding. That was why Claire terrified him. Because for the first time in years, somebody cared about him before knowing what he owned. The older man interrupted his thoughts. And the woman. Elijah looked up immediately. "What about her? You've mentioned her 3 times this week." Elijah walked toward the window. Houston glowed beneath him. "She's different. They always seem different at first." Elijah stayed quiet, but deep down, fear already lived inside him. What if Claire changed too? What if the kindness disappeared once she saw the money? What if she stopped looking at him the way she did inside that trailer? Loneliness settled heavily in his chest. Not the loneliness of being poor. The loneliness of never knowing whether love was real. "You can't hide forever," the older man said gently. Elijah stared out at the city lights. "Yes, I can." The man shook his head slowly. "No, because eventually she'll ask why a maintenance worker gets private calls from billionaires." That night, Elijah drove back to the trailer alone. Rain covered the windshield. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Part of him wanted to tell Claire everything. Another part remembered every woman who had changed after discovering his wealth. By the time he reached the trailer park, exhaustion sat deep in his bones. He stepped outside the truck and froze. Claire's car was parked near the trailer. His heartbeat quickened. The light inside the trailer was on. As Elijah walked closer, he heard Claire's voice from inside. Then suddenly, his phone rang. The screen lit up. Board Chairman Carter Holdings. Elijah answered quietly, "Yes." The voice on the other end sounded tense. "Mr. Carter, tomorrow's board meeting cannot be delayed again." Elijah closed his eyes briefly. I said, "I'll handle it." "Sir, the shareholders are demanding to see the owner in person inside the trailer." Claire became silent. Elijah's stomach tightened. Then the chairman spoke again. "People are starting to question why the billionaire owner of Morrison Logistics keeps hiding." Elijah slowly turned toward the trailer window, and inside, Claire was standing perfectly still, listening. The next morning, Claire could barely focus at work. The phone call she overheard kept replaying in her mind. People are starting to question why the billionaire owner of Morrison Logistics keeps hiding billionaire owner. The words felt unreal. She wanted to ask Elijah directly, but every time she looked at him, he seemed distant, quiet. Careful, like a man standing too close to the edge of something dangerous. By noon, tension filled the entire office. A major client meeting was scheduled that afternoon, and Brandon Hale had been acting worse than usual all day. He barked orders at employees, complained about tiny mistakes, and treated Elijah like a punching bag. Carter Brandon snapped across the hallway. "Why are those files still sitting there?" Elijah looked over calmly. "They're waiting for accounting approval." Brandon walked closer. "I didn't ask for excuses." Several employees lowered their heads immediately. Nobody wanted attention from Brandon when he was angry. Elijah stayed calm. "I'll move them." Brandon smirked. "That's what you people always say?" Claire froze at her desk. The hallway became silent. Elijah slowly looked at Brandon. "What does that mean?" Brandon shrugged casually. "People who grow up thinking bare minimum effort deserves praise." Claire stood immediately. "That's enough." Brandon looked annoyed. "Claire, stay out of this, no," she said sharply. "You keep talking to him like he's beneath you." Brandon laughed softly. "He cleans floors for a living." And Claire fired back. Brandon stepped closer to Elijah. "So tell me, Carter," he said mockingly, "did they teach janitorial skills in your trailer park?" A few employees looked uncomfortable. Others pretended not to hear. Elijah's face remained calm, but Claire noticed something different in his eyes. Anger. Real anger. Brandon smiled wider. "You should actually be grateful." He continued, "Most companies wouldn't even hire people from neighborhoods like yours." Claire slammed her hand against the desk stop. The sound echoed through the office. Everyone turned toward her. Claire stepped between the two men. "You don't get to humiliate people because you wear an expensive suit." Brandon's face darkened. "You're being emotional." "No," Claire replied. "You're being cruel." For a moment, nobody moved then. Brandon suddenly grabbed Elijah's work shirt near the collar. The entire office gasped. "You think you're special?" Brandon hissed quietly. "You're maintenance, nothing more." Claire immediately grabbed Brandon's arm. "Let him go." Elijah slowly removed Brandon's hand himself. His movement stayed calm. Too calm, that somehow made the moment even more frightening. "You should walk away," Elijah said quietly. Brandon laughed. Or what, Elijah stared at him. And for one dangerous second, he almost said everything. Claire could feel it. The truth sat right there behind his eyes. Then suddenly the elevator doors opened. 3 men in dark suits stepped into the office. Behind them came Arthur Bennett, the older executive from Carter Holdings. The moment Brandon saw the group, his expression changed completely. Confusion spread across the office. Nobody understood why board executives were suddenly there. Arthur scanned the room quickly. Then his eyes landed on Elijah. Relief crossed his face. "There you are," Arthur said. The office became still. Arthur straightened his suit respectfully. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. "Mr. Carter, the board meeting cannot wait any longer." Complete silence. Brandon blinked. What Arthur looked confused. The board has been waiting for over an hour. Nobody moved. Claire stared at Elijah. Mr. Carter. Not maintenance. Not janitor. Mr. Carter. Brandon laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. Arthur frowned slightly. Mistake. Then realization crossed his face slowly. Arthur turned toward the office employees. You people seriously don't know who he is? The room felt frozen. Elijah closed his eyes briefly like a man watching the exact moment his world collapsed. Arthur continued carefully. Elijah Carter purchased Morrison Logistics 3 years ago through Carter Holdings. Gasps spread through the office. One employee nearly dropped a stack of folders. Brandon's face lost all color. Arthur looked toward Elijah respectfully. He saved this company from bankruptcy, saved over 4,000 jobs. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed loudly. Claire stared at Elijah like she no longer recognized him. Her mind replayed everything. The trailer, the old pickup truck, the maintenance uniform, the humiliation, the silence, all of it suddenly looked different. Brandon stepped backward slowly. You're the owner. Elijah finally looked at him. Yes, just one word. Calm, cold, heavy. Brandon's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Really small. Arthur glanced toward the wrinkled work shirt Brandon had grabbed moments earlier. His expression hardened. Immediately did someone put their hands on Mr. Carter. Nobody answered. They did not need to. Arthur already knew. Brandon swallowed hard. Sure. I didn't, Elijah. Arthur interrupted gently. Security is ready whenever you give the order. The meaning behind those words hit everyone instantly. Brandon looked terrified now, but Elijah stayed silent, because the humiliation no longer mattered. Not compared to the expression on Claire's face. She looked hurt, not impressed, not excited. Hurt. That affected him more than Brandon ever could. Claire took one slow step backward. Her eyes never left Elijah, or maybe the man she thought Elijah was. You lied to me, she whispered. Elijah's chest tightened immediately, Claire, but she barely heard him. The office around her suddenly felt unreal. The quiet janitor, the wounded man from the trailer park, the person she defended. Now standing in front of her was a billionaire owner, hidden beneath work boots and old uniforms, and somehow that hurt more than she expected. Elijah looked at her carefully, but Claire no longer knew which version of him was real. She stared at him like a stranger, and for the first time since meeting her, Elijah Carter looked afraid. The office stayed silent after the truth came out. No one looked at Brandon anymore. No one cared about his expensive suit, his title, his power. All eyes were on Elijah, or rather on Mr. Carter. Claire stood a few feet away from him, but suddenly it felt like miles. Elijah took one step toward her. Claire. Please. She raised one hand. Not angry, not loud, just hurt. Elijah? Don't. That quiet voice hurt him more than Brandon's hand on his shirt. Arthur Bennett looked around and cleared his throat. We should move this discussion somewhere private. But Claire shook her head. I need air. She walked toward the hallway. Elijah followed Claire. She stopped near the glass doors. Rain had started outside soft at first, then harder against the pavement for a moment. Neither of them spoke behind them. Employees whispered in front of them. The storm darkened the parking lot. Claire finally turned, so it was all true. Elijah swallowed. Yes. You own Morrison Logistics. Yes. And the trailer. His face tightened. That part was real. Claire let out a small, painful laugh. I don't even know what that means anymore. It means I grew up there, Elijah said quickly. That was my mother's home. That was my life. But it isn't your life now. He had no answer. That silence was enough. Claire looked down, trying to steady herself. I'm not upset. Because you have money. Elijah looked at her carefully. She continued, I'm upset. Because you let me open my heart to a version of you that wasn't complete. His eyes softened. I wanted to tell you when her voice broke slightly, after I defended you in front of Brandon, after I sat in your mother's trailer, after I told you not to be ashamed. Elijah looked away. Claire nodded slowly. That's what hurts. He stepped closer. I was afraid of what that money would change, how you saw me. Claire stared at him, and hiding it. Was supposed to protect us, so, he said quietly. It was supposed to protect me. The honesty made the moment even heavier. Claire's eyes filled, but she did not cry yet. At least you know that. Elijah breathed in slowly. I've had people love the money before they ever knew me. I understand that. Claire said I do. Then her voice became softer. But do you understand what it feels like to be poor, and always judged to sit in that trailer with you, and think you trusted me with something sacred, only to realize you were still testing whether I was safe? Elijah froze that word. Cut deep testing, he had told himself this was not a test. Not exactly, but maybe it was. Maybe every hidden truth had been a quiet question. Will she stay? Will she change? Will she love me less? Claire wiped one tear from her cheek rich. People are afraid of being used, she said. Poor people are afraid of being looked down on. Elijah listened without moving. And people like me, she continued, people who have been lied to before, we're afraid of trusting the wrong person again. His face fell. I never wanted to hurt you. I know that made it worse because she believed him. Elijah had not been cruel. He had been scared, but fear could still wound people. Claire looked back toward the office. Brandon stood far away, now pale and silent. Employees stared through the glass like they were watching a movie. Claire hated that their pain had become a scene. She turned back to Elijah. Did you think I would only love you if you were poor, no? Did you think I would only love you if you were rich, oh? Then why didn't you let me choose the whole truth? Elijah closed his eyes briefly, because he had no good answer. Claire stepped back. I needed honesty. Elijah, not money, not a mansion, not a perfect story. Rain fell harder outside, the glass doors trembled softly with thunder. Elijah's voice became low. Can we talk somewhere else? Claire looked at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her wanted to believe him immediately. But another part of her remembered the old trailer. His lowered eyes. The shame, the way she had trusted that moment. And now she did not know where truth ended, and fear began. I can't do this right now, she whispered. Elijah's face changed. Claire, I need space. She pushed the glass door open. Rain rushed in with cold wind. Elijah followed one step, then stopped because he knew chasing her would only make the wound deeper. Claire walked across the parking lot without an umbrella. Her hair became wet almost instantly. Her shoulders shook, but she did not turn around. Elijah stood by the door, watching her leave. For the first time in years, his money meant nothing, his company meant nothing, his power meant nothing, because the only woman who had seen the boy inside him was walking away in the rain. That night, Elijah did not go to his mansion. He did not call Arthur. He did not answer messages from the board. He did not ask anyone where Claire had gone. He already knew she needed space, and for once he had to respect that. So Elijah drove back to the old trailer park alone. Rain followed him all the way across Houston. By the time he parked in front of the white trailer, the ground had turned muddy. The porch light flickered weakly. The roof dripped in 2 places. Everything looked the same, but Elijah did not. He sat inside the truck for a long time, both hands resting on the wheel. Then he whispered, I'm sorry, Mama. The words broke something in him. He stepped out into the rain and unlocked the trailer inside. The air smelled like old wood and dust. He turned on the lamp near the couch. Soft yellow light filled the small room for years. This place had been his reminder. A reminder not to become arrogant, not to forget struggle, not to let money make him cruel. But now he saw something else. He had also used this place as armor, a way to test people, a way to hide, a way to ask for love without giving the whole truth. Elijah walked to the wall of photographs. His mother, Denise Carter, smiled back at him from an old frame. He touched the glass gently. "You told me never to bow my head," he whispered, but I kept hiding it anyway. His chest tightened. He remembered being 9 years old, placing buckets under leaks during storms. He remembered his mother counting quarters at the kitchen table. He remembered promising himself he would become rich enough that nobody could ever look down on him again. And then he did. He became rich, powerful, untouchable. But the boy inside him never fully believed he was safe. A knock came at the door. Elijah wiped his face quickly and opened it. Miss Evelyn stood outside with an umbrella and a tired smile. "I saw your truck," she said. "Figured your heart was heavy." Elijah stepped aside. She entered slowly for a moment. She looked around the trailer. Then she looked at him and she found out. Elijah nodded, yes. "You told her," he looked down. The truth found her. Miss Evelyn sighed. That is usually the painful way. Elijah sat on the old couch. Miss Evelyn sat across from him. Rain tapped steadily against the roof. "She thinks I tested her," Elijah said. "Did you?" He did not answer right away. That was answer enough. Miss Evelyn leaned back. Baby pain can make a man careful, but too much. Careful starts looking like dishonesty. Elijah closed his eyes. "I was scared she would change. Maybe she would have. Maybe she wouldn't." Her voice stayed gentle. "But love is not something you prove by hiding half of yourself." Elijah looked at her. Miss Evelyn continued. "You were not looking for a woman who could love a poor man." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the room. "You kept bringing your heart back here, because this is where it got hurt." Elijah became still. Miss Evelyn's voice softened. "You don't need to find someone who loves the poor version of you. You need someone who understands the pain you carried from that version." Elijah said nothing. But those words reached him deeply because she was right. Claire had not rejected the trailer she had stayed. She had seen the old table, the bills, the photographs. She had honored his mother's struggle, and he still had not trusted her with the full truth. That was on him. Elijah looked toward the rain-covered window. "I love her," he said quietly. Miss Evelyn nodded. "I know. But I hurt her, yes, so what do I do?" Miss Evelyn stood slowly. "You stop trying to control whether she stays." Elijah looked up. "You tell the truth, then you let her choose." After Miss Evelyn left, Elijah remained alone in the trailer. The rain finally slowed. He picked up his phone. Claire's name sat on the screen. For several minutes, he did not move. Then he typed one message. "I'm sorry. You deserved the whole truth. I won't chase you. I won't pressure you. I just want you to be free to choose what is right for your heart." He stared at it, then sent it. For the first time, Elijah. Carter did not use money power or silence to protect himself. He simply let go. 3 days passed. Elijah did not call Claire again. He wanted to every morning. He picked up his phone every night. He put it back down. But he had promised not to chase her, so he waited. Not as a billionaire, not as the owner of Morrison Logistics, just as a man who had hurt someone he loved. On the 4th evening, Elijah returned to the trailer park again. The sun was low over Houston. The old road glowed orange. Children played near the broken basketball hoop. Miss Evelyn sat on her porch, watching the street like she always did. Elijah parked in front of the old trailer. He stepped out slowly, then he stopped. Claire's car was there. For a moment, he could not move. She stood beside the porch wearing jeans, a simple jacket, and no makeup. Rain clouds gathered above the neighborhood. But she had come not to his mansion, not to his downtown office, not to the place where people called him Mr. Carter. She had come here to the trailer. Elijah walked towards her carefully. Claire, she looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but they were not cold. I didn't know if I should come, she said. I'm glad you did. She looked toward the trailer. I almost drove to your office first. Elijah waited. Then I realized that wasn't where I needed to go. His throat tightened. Claire stepped onto the porch. This is where you showed me your pain. Elijah looked down. And where I hid the rest of the truth, yes. The word was quiet, but honest. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind moved softly through the old trees near the road. Miss Evelyn watched from her porch, but said nothing. Claire turned back to Elijah. I was angry. I know I felt foolish. His face changed. I'm sorry, I know that too. She took a slow breath. What hurt me most was not the money, Elijah. He stayed still. It was realizing you trusted me with your poverty, but not with your power. Those words landed heavily. Elijah nodded once. You're right, Claire looked surprised by how quickly he accepted it. He continued. I wanted you to see the boy from this trailer, but I was afraid to let you see the man who owns the company. Why? Because people treat rich men differently too. Claire listened. Some people want what you have. Some hate you for having it. And after a while, you stop knowing who is real. Claire's face softened. But I was real with you. I know. No, she said gently. You hoped I was real, but you did not let me prove it with the truth. Elijah closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. You're right again. That made Claire's expression shift. Not healed yet, but softer. Elijah stepped back slightly. I won't ask you to forgive me tonight. Claire looked at him. I won't ask you to stay. I won't use love to pressure you, and I won't hide behind pain to excuse what I did. His voice grew quieter. I just want you to know, the man you met was real. Claire looked at the trailer door. The man who sat with me at that table. Yes. The man who loved his mother, yes. The man Brandon humiliated. Yes, and the man who owns Morrison Logistics. Elijah swallowed. Yes, all of them. Me? Claire's eyes filled with tears. That was the first honest answer she had been waiting for. Not perfect, just whole. She stepped closer. I don't love that old trailer. Elijah's breath caught. Claire continued softly. I love the man who never forgot where he came from. Elijah looked at her, like the words had reached a place money never could. But if we try again, she said, there can't be tests. No tests, no half-truths, no half-truths. And when you're afraid, you tell me. Elijah nodded. I will. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she took his hand. Not quickly, not dramatically, but carefully, like trust being rebuilt one small piece at a time. Miss Evelyn smiled from her porch and wiped one eye. Elijah held Claire's hand gently. He did not feel powerful. He did not feel rich. For the first time in a long time, he simply felt seen, and that was worth more than everything he owned. Sometimes, people who grow up with very little spend the rest of their lives trying not to feel small again. And sometimes people with power become so afraid of being used that they hide the very parts of themselves that deserve love the most. Elijah thought money was the thing he needed to protect, but in the end, it was his honesty that mattered more. Claire never cared about the mansion. She never cared about the company. She cared about the man who still remembered the sound of rain falling through a broken roof beside his mother. Real love did not heal them, because one person was rich and the other was kind. It healed them, because for the first time both of them felt fully seen, Not judged, not tested, not worshipped, just understood. And sometimes that understanding is worth more than everything money can buy.